It's a big story that we've been following the past couple of days. A reservoir in Rensselaer County could be on its last leg here. The Dunham Reservoir Dam in Grafton Lake State Park might have to be drained and the dam removed entirely.
The state has deemed the dam unsound, and the dam is also deemed high risk because if it fails, it could cause widespread damage to homes, highways, businesses, and be a life-threatening situation, so repairs are critical. Some are being done, but feasibility reports have urged the state to remove the dam entirely, and people living nearby say they're not okay with that. The public boat launch of the Dunham Reservoir is free, and on some days, a quiet sanctuary. On other days, it's the site of a pop-up press conference calling to save this picturesque scene. Jean McDermott is one of the kayakers here today. She owns Graywacke Meadows, a wedding venue not far from the reservoir. You're a big kayaker, I take it?
I am. I'm breaking into paddleboarding, but kayaking, paddleboarding. We grew up down here fishing, you know, uncles, aunts, grandparents. I mean, we've all used it for generations.
She and others want the dam fully revamped, bringing it in line with today's safety standards. That's the most expensive option. The state recently held community meetings highlighting ways to fix the safety issues posed by the dam. First, the state could do a full replacement to a cost of $20 million. The second choice would cost $9.6 million. That would remove the dam and restore the stream, creating a wetland that the Parks Department says could still be used for fishing or hiking, just no longer boating. The last option would cost $6.1 million. Remove the dam and not restore the wetlands. Still available for recreation, the state says, but little extra help to nature. McDermott says she's not buying those price tags.
Because I used to work in construction and I know that construction costs don't stay where they're supposed to be. So their cheap out version cost is not going to stay that. And if they spend as much to empty this as they could have to repair it, then it's a sickening thought.
As of right now, the Parks Department is not removing the dam. It's replacing 4 valves, waterproofing the main valve chamber, repairing the inlet structure, and stabilizing the spillway outlet channel.
People are calling for independent studies. There's not a whole lot of faith in the feasibility study, so I know that there's a few politicians looking into calling county engineers in to take a look at it.
John Bulmer knows this park inside and out. He's a photographer and started a petition to save the reservoir. As of airtime, the petition has about 1,900 signatures. He says the news about the dam upgrades are a step in the right direction.
It's complicated. I think it's a good step. It shows they haven't abandoned the project. It shows they're moving towards stabilizing this. But there's no guarantees, so that the announcement they made this week doesn't provide any guarantees that any long-term solutions will be made or they're being funded.
So what's stopping the state from revamping the dam entirely? According to a feasibility study published last September and revised this past June, the concerns are the cost of owning and operating the dam, as well as the liability. And Bulmer says, among others, there is frustration that there's no timeline for when that final decision will come. I wanted to hear from the Parks Department myself, so I met up with Elaine Balchinian, the regional director for the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation.
When I was a young girl and came to RPI, that's what brought me to this area, and I found that place. So I have a love for it.
Balchinian emphasizes her marching orders are to work on replacing the valves, a process that she says could take years between the design, bidding, and installation phases. She says the Parks Department is still looking at the options, and the money is a sticking point.
This is a legacy structure that is going to require a lot of money, and it's one of many lakes that we have here at Grafton Lakes State Park. So I think we're considering it. You know, we're trying to figure it out. If the money became available with public pressure or with whatever, you know, great. We'd be happy to move it forward.
Senator Jake Ashby, who represents Rensselaer County, says there is money available. He wants the state to use some of the $425 million added to the Environmental Protection Fund. That money was announced in May.
In my opinion, and what we have in the Dunham Reservoir is not only a recreational area, but a thriving ecosystem. And when we examine what the Environmental Protection Fund is for, this is it.
Balchinian wasn't able to give me a timeline for when a final decision would be made. Ashby said that's something he's going to continue to push for.
In terms of the timeline for a decision on what direction to take, you know, I wasn't given a clear answer on that either. And that's, to me, that's unsatisfactory. You know, not just, you know, for me, but for my constituents and for everybody that uses, you know, the reservoir.
Balchinian warns this is a problem that New York must become familiar with.
Everybody's going to face this, Rachel. There are so many dams in this condition in our state. You know, this one happened to come to the fore because Rensselaer County was notified through the DEC dam safety letters that I get. So they're seeing, it's an education for all of us. I'm glad you're doing this article because the understanding of high hazard dams, why they're classified that way, why our understanding of the of how to build them has evolved to an understanding that they're now not doing their job.
So there are some concerns here. People at the press conference Thursday had questions. What happens if the reservoir goes away and we have a hurricane or a tropical storm? Will downstream flood? What about the wells? Will residents have to redig them? Coming up tonight, live at 9 on My 4, we're going to take a closer look at this issue. A popular kayaking spot in Rensselaer County could soon be going away. The Dunham Reservoir is at risk of being drained and the dam removed. On Live at 5 tonight, I showed you how much it would cost the state to fully revamp the dam and bring it to today's standards. Right now, it's deemed unsound and a high risk for flooding if it should fail. But if the dam is removed, that leaves a lot of questions. Questions that people who live near the reservoir are concerned aren't being taken into consideration by the state. A flotilla of kayaks surrounded the boat launch on Dunham Reservoir Thursday, calling for this peaceful spot to be preserved. Jay McDermott is one of said kayakers. She owns a wedding venue near here called Greywhack Meadows, and she's worried about the future of this man-made lake.
My wedding couples come down here and take gorgeous photos at the water's edge. Now look at it.
She says the state lets her have up to 200 people in her venue for each event. But with the reservoir potentially going away, that leaves a problem. Fire. The water in the reservoir is already dropping. The New York State Parks Department says this is to alleviate some of the pressure on the dam. But at a press conference Thursday, citizens pointed out this is where they pulled water to fight fires. And now the pipe that leads to a dry hydrant is above the water line.
With the hydrant being dry, with the pipe now obviously above the water line, I mean, is that a safety concern? Is there a way to fight fires out here if it stays this way?
The dry hydrants are here for a reason, to access water from our many lakes, and it's definitely a public safety hazard beyond. And I was not aware of this until a week ago Monday.
So if let's say there was a fire tonight, heaven forbid, I mean, how would you fight the fire? Could you?
The Chief Goyer of the Grafton Volunteer Fire Department has let me know that he would have capacity with tankers, but he'd be relying on our fellow municipalities for that help. Okay. When we have the resources right here to do it ourselves.
Time is everything with that. Time is everything.
Exactly, yes. Time is everything. How long will it take a tanker to get to a house next door when this is right here, albeit uncovered and dry?
Every dime we had went into that business. You know, if we have to wait 15 minutes, you know, longer because they have to come from another water source, that's detrimental. And none of the residents should have to deal with that at their houses, let alone a wedding venue.
Fire is not the only concern. Some residents are worried about having to redig their wells if this runs dry. In a one-on-one interview with the regional director for New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, I asked about that.
That might be something we need to look into, again, for the decision-making process. I learned of that only at the public meeting, and we'd have to take we'd have to hire a hydrologist to figure it out.
The other concern? Flooding.
We have questions, too, about that. If there's no dam, what happens when there's storms? Will the will the damage be greater and more frequent downstream? So we need those questions answered.
This map from the Parks Department was shown to residents at a public comment meeting about the project. It shows what would flood if the current dam had a sudden failure. I asked Balchinian if the floodplain would be similar if the dam was removed.
We would have to study it, but I think our immediate concern is this architecture that is old and needs to be repaired, and we have to kind of sensibly assess what options do we have and where are we going to find that funding.
Senator Jake Ashby and Assemblyman Scott Bendet say there's an answer.
We just put over $400 million into an environmental protection fund. So the money is there, and I think that this would really be a very useful way to use that money and to make sure that the state continues to fulfill its obligation to the people of Grafton and the people of Rensselaer County.
If that money can be used, relief for the people here.
It's just a really great resource here in this area for people to take an hour after work and just come here and relax and chill out.
Now, I reached out to the governor's office to ask about using the EPF funds, and I'll let you know if I hear back. In the meantime, Parks says it's focused on replacing the 4 valves in the dam for now. The decommission, as of right now, is not on the agenda.
The water levels at the Dunham Reservoir are dropping, and people living nearby say this creates a fire hazard. We showed you back in July how the state has safety concerns about the Dunham Dam and is dropping water to relieve pressure on the structure. As Rachel Tiede shows us in this 13 Investigates, many people in Grafton are wondering when there will be some answers.
When I was here back in July, bringing this story to you for the very first time, only the very top of this rock was above the water line. As you can see now, it's very different.
Ruins of old cellars start to emerge from the water, showing a history long since past. What was once a farmstead building now is a pile of rocks, caked in mud and dried up clamshells. Signs the water is dropping at the Dunham Reservoir. Beaver huts sit above the water line too, as well as this dry hydrant. This, according to the Grafton Town Supervisor, is the second rendition of this hydrant, used to fight house fires on this side of the waterway. It was deemed broken and unusable as the water dropped initially, so the New York State Parks Department worked with the Grafton Fire Department to fix this, extending the pipe. That is something that the town supervisor says she sees as a good faith effort. But now...
It was underwater just 10 days ago when they made the repair. Now it's above water again. It's really not going to pump much if they needed it right now.
This was a concern back in July as well. Gundam saying they'd have to rely on neighboring fire companies if a house fire broke out.
That's a critical part of the infrastructure of the Dunham that is beneficial to the public safety on this end of town, and right now it's useless.
Mike Smith with the Grafton Fire Commission says there is very little that can be done to make this specific hydrant work again. Extending it again would be useless, he says.
It wouldn't be effective if it was extended any further.
Oh, why is that?
The limit that the fire tankers can draft water, the further away from the pump you get and the further below the pump you get, the less effective they are.
So the only way to make this work is to raise the water level?
Bring the water level back where it belongs.
I reached out to the Parks Department about this concern. The spokesman said, quote, Parks is not planning further work on the dry hydrant at the Dunham Reservoir. Parks installed a new horizontal pipe to replace damage to the hydrant. The new, longer pipe was designed in consultation with the Grafton Fire Department, end quote. The Parks Department also told me that the fire department could pull from Mill and Second ponds within Grafton Lake State Parks. That's something the town supervisor confirms, but has concerns about the fluctuating water levels. Which leads to another question. Many of the folks living here have questions about potential flooding if the dam were to be removed. Back in July, I asked the Parks Department about that, and they said they'd have to study it.
We probably need an examination of the watershed here.
Smith says he'd like to see an independent study done on that topic. No final decision has been made whether to decommission the dam. Right now, the Parks Department is working on a project to replace 4 valves on the dam. The park spokesman telling me those valves are on site. Parks also working with the DEC on other projects to improve the dam, like waterproofing the main valve chamber, repairing the inlet structure, and stabilizing the spillway outlet channel. All this while that final decision is weighed to either decommission or restore, a decision that is heavily anticipated.
Please come fix the Dunham, fix this for us, for the future of, so the people who've known the Dunham their whole life can grow old here and continue to enjoy it, and then more importantly, the future generations of Grafton kids are going to be able to use it as a resource like we did.
Reporting from Grafton Lake State Park, Rachel Tiede for 13 Investigates.
And Rachel also reached out to Assemblyman Scott Bendett, who represents that area. He said he plans to bring up this issue during the legislative session.